So in part 1 and 2, I made clear that you should prepare for your afterlife. One of the highest forms of spirituality, one of the highest, characteristics of the highest form of spirituality is your lifestyle, your works, your good deeds. So the more you risk to do the right thing, the greater your spirit becomes. It's in the struggle, it's in the sacrifice, it's in the suffering to do right. It's going against the grain. It's having the world hate you. Let me read from the Bible real quick, and I'll address the race issue in a second. Cursed is anyone who kills their neighbor secretly. Then all the people shall say Amen. Deuteronomy 27:24. John 15:18. If the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. Matthew 10:22. You will be hated by everyone because of me, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. I got one more scripture, and we'll leave it there. James 5:5. Go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for your misery that shall come upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. And it goes on to say, ye have lived in pleasure. It's James 1-7. James 5:1-7. Ye have lived in pleasure on the earth and been wanton. Ye have nourished your hearts as in a day of slaughter. Ye have condemned and killed the just, and he doth not resist you. He's saying that you're basically killing the just and the meek, and the two together. So one of the highest forms of spirituality is resistance against the evil ones. Okay? Now I say a lot of things, I'm very harsh on people. The way I describe things, I decided to say, you know what, this is how God describes it. If it's good enough for God, it's good enough for me. When God was looking at Sodom and Gomorrah and Babylon and stuff, I'm sure there was some righteous people there. I mean, probably, it's hard to have a whole major center of culture and whatnot, and to not have any good people. But he spoke of them all together, because what do you see collectively from these people? Well, if you look at the races, what do you see? What you see collectively from black people is a strong desire to be spiritual. You see a lot of brainwashing that comes from other races. If they had stuck to their culture, they would have been a lot better off. They're being duped. They're being deceived by wicked people who have gone way out of their way to do so. Have held food and, living space, food and shelter over their heads. They've gone way out of their way to deceive, to enslave, to dumb down, to trick, to lie, and so on. So what you see from black people is you see they're victimized. There's a lot of them that are struggling to be spiritual. Of course, there's degrees of sellouts, there's criminals and all this stuff. But the root cause, you have to look at the root cause of things. When you look at something, you say, this is what it is, and this is why it is. And that's how you judge something. Okay? That's how you judge people collectively. Okay? Not ultimately judge, which is wrong, because, it's not my job to say who's going to hell and who's going to heaven. But I will say what lifestyles lead to hell and what lead to heaven. And I will say what groups seem to be doing it right and what groups seem to be doing it wrong. And I'm pretty damn sure that I'm right about this. So, that's basically black people in a nutshell. There's other things going on too, but, I have to limit how much I can talk about this. So what do you see with white people? White people are interesting people. There's, they're in a way, they're one of the more open-minded races, if you want to group them as races. Science says there's no race, but, we're trying to keep things simple at the risk of oversimplifying. There's different points of view. You have hippies, and you have skaters and bikers, you have white-collar criminals, you have serial killers, and there's a lot of different types of white people. So, in a way, it's kind of harder to put them, in a box, because with whites and Jews, they're just, they're the biggest oppressors in society. But there's also groups of people within their race that aren't so bad. So it's sort of confusing. And perhaps I am wrong when I put them all in, when I start getting angry and I start putting them all in I start speaking harshly about them. But I'm sure we all understand why that is. We live in a culture and a time, for those of you in the future will be seeing this, we live in a time where, a black guy can go on and on about how much he hates white people, and then go hang out with his white friend. He can literally tell his white friend about how bad white people are, and if his white friend did the same thing to him, he would be outraged. And it's not because there's an imbalance in how things are. It's because it's accepted that white people are victimizing people all over the world. Not all white people, but enough of them. So it becomes so hard to say, well, this specific group, because there's different groups doing it on different levels. There's racist cops, there's white-collar criminals, there's, government contractors, there's, and so on and so forth. There's fucking shrinks and Nazi fucking eugenicists and on and on. So it becomes much easier to say, these white people are doing this. And nobody can really logically expect you to put it any other way. You're like, well, it's these, every time you're going to complain about it, you're going to list them all out. You're going to say who is and who isn't? Or you're going to say, damn you white people, you do this and this. And the white guy who's, pretty much a victim of it too, really, he's going to say, yeah, that's how it is. And he understands. He understands when you start going off and calling white people names, shit. Then you go hang out with your white friend. And that's literally how it is in these times. And that needs to be said. Because people are going to twist it and say that I'm a hypocrite or something. When it's understood already that that's how it is. And that's how you explain it. That is the appropriate, accepted way of explaining it. So, even among whites. So, and sometimes, only exception is when I get carried away and I start calling them. But even that is part of the culture here that's accepted. It's logical that you're going to get carried away and be like, those motherfuckers. And so on. Do I hate all white people? No, I'm half white. So about half of my family is white. I have Jews in my fucking family as well. My mom's, sibling, one of her siblings, married a Jew. So that logically, in their child, their offspring, Jew. So, yeah. So anyway, with white people, they're the oppressor. They're also the victim. They're also the people who are downplaying the harm that their own race has done, because they a lot of them don't appreciate being the bad guy, so they're going to try to play it off and water it down and downplay the harm that their race has done, and and so on. So that's pretty much what it is. It's really the Western philosophies that are the problem, not necessarily the people. It's the cultures and the philosophies that are the problem. It is the materialistic culture of Western civilizations that's the problem here. And you see a lot of white people, they understand that. That's why they're going to Buddhism, and that's why they're going to being Christian, which comes from the Middle East. That's why they're going to be Rastafarians, and you see these white guys with dreadlocks and so on, because they're trying to escape that evil white devil culture, And I'm sorry that's what it is, but that's what it is, It's the same thing with Jews. Just in the news today, those Jews marching with Arabs for peace. A lot. I'm sure that not all of them see it as the Zionists' fault that there isn't peace, but I'm sure a whole lot of them do. And they're like, and most of them probably were simply like, we don't care why you're fighting, we just want it to stop. We don't want, we want to be safe and we want to live in peace. And most of them don't really, a lot of them probably don't concede the point that it's disproportionately the Zionist fault. And a lot of the Palestinians have the hate that hate made. So these are the times we live in. I mean, personally, I don't hate the Jewish people. I might get carried away in some videos and call them names, but I don't hate them for being Jews. I hate this kind of Babylonian satanic culture, and so they're, with me, I'm a very angry guy. I'm a warrior. When a warrior expresses his hatred towards his enemies, don't expect him to take the time to say it's this group within the enemies. More often than not, right or wrong, he's going to describe it in a way, that seems unfair, or, that seems racist, or so on and so forth. So anyway, and you also saw the same thing with the Black Panther Party. If you look at the Black Panther speeches, they're saying these fucking crackers and, these fucking honkies, and we're going to do this to them, and so on and so forth. But their official ideology was not racist ideology. They stood with different groups of people, including white leftist groups. And if you read the book I referenced recently, The Black Panther Party Reconsidered, it's quite apparent. It's well recorded by multiple people who were there and of all races, that that's how it was. So, that's what it is. And also, you know, personally, from what I feel, I'm not sure. This is my opinion. Most of the time, I'm giving you the facts. And when it's my opinion, this is my opinion. This is my opinion. I feel that white people have created this mess, so it's disproportionately their responsibility to clean it up. You know, they got a clean house. You know, if you don't want to go down history as a bunch of scum, then you should, you know, make it a priority, you know, to address the corrupt people in your culture. You know, the same thing with the Jews. Same thing with any culture. And with these more oppressed, victimized cultures like black culture, African Americans, for example, you know, it's harder to address our problems without the root cause being addressed. And it's not easy for us to address that cause, to, you know, that root cause. You know, can 12% of the population address this you know, these rich white and Jews and other people who are the root cause of the problem, who are hiding behind the rest of the population? You know, it's probably not going to happen. So without white people and Jews and everyone else, you know, coming together to address these people, it will not change. So right now, the major, you know, fronts we see happening is this battle between us and them, and the controlled opposition that serves them. You know, politics is a bunch of greedy people who make no excuses, who openly talk that shit, a bunch of controlled oppositions who helps hold them up, you know, and make themselves seem like they're on your side, and the real opposition, you know. So, you know, I have a lot of disdain in my heart, a lot of hatred in my heart for controlled opposition. And you'll hear it in the way I describe things and so on and so forth. You know, it's just how it is. You know, it's just how it is. For example, if you were, you know, say this white guy in the news recently, right? His he had his high beams on. He flashed his high beams on a cop, and I guess his reason was that the cop had his high beams on, and that, you know, I was taught that you know, if someone has their high beams on and they might not know it, that you should flash them real quick. You know, I don't know the whole story. I don't know if the cop had his high beams on. I don't know if he was being a jerk or not. I don't know. Okay, but to make a long story short, he was killed. The cop tried to tase him at first, and then I guess he got pissed off and tried to attack him. He pretty much complied with the cop's orders, except for the cell phone, which is partly the American culture's fault in a way, because there's this huge movement, you know, to reporters and so on, of people recording the cops, and so people feel like tough, and they want to look tough in front of their friends, you know, saying, look, I told this cop how I felt about it. I've had people who record cops, you know, tell me, you know, they brag about how they didn't back down and so on. And in a way, it's partially, you know, that part of it is partially society's fault, both the cops and people for making things that way and so on. But anyway, make a long story short, the reason why I brought this up is that you could, you know, if that guy's family then turned around and said, fuck all pigs and this and that, I hate them and I want to kill them and all this stuff, you know, it wouldn't be because they're fucking crazy, first of all. Because if I did the same thing, they would take me to the psych ward. But, you know, even though you have a good reason to be like that, I'd understand. But, you know, obviously the system, you know, might understand in their case, wouldn't understand in my case. But, you know, it wouldn't necessarily be because they think all cops are bad. It would be because they were victimized by that particular cop. Another way to look at it is the corrupt culture which exists within the police, this kind of code of silence and corrupt culture that exists within the police force, and this culture of covering up their mistakes, you know. And so then they would say, you know what, fuck all these pigs and so on and so forth. And it's the same thing with the black people are doing with white people, you know. And I thought that it's very important for me to point this out, because sometimes I simply apologize and say I got carried away, but you truly have to explain this as well to understand why I do it that way, you know. And of course that I'm half white, you know. You know, for some people that makes, you know, that counts, but for some people it doesn't. But anyway, you know, personally, you know, I have friends who are white. There's targeted individuals who are white. There's white people, I'm sure, that even though I talk all this shit, they would still stand with me. But it's hard for me to find them, especially because the government is trying to keep me from finding them, you know. And you know, we're like separated, and there's all this confusion with controlled opposition, informants, collaborators, and helpers of the New World Order, and what have you. And people who are brainwashed, you know, and people and conformists and so on. So, you know, when all is said and done, You know, part of what divides us is the way that we talk, and part of it is the culture that accepts it. Well, I'm out of time. Thank you.